The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this webcast on how to launch a winning coaching, training, or consulting practice. I'm Jim Lewis, and I'll be working with you throughout the next hour. And if you haven't downloaded your slides, you'll get a chance to do that again later on. But I'm going to go ahead and move into the program. I noticed that we have a friend of mine from India online, and one of my colleagues, Mark, is here. Raj, hello, and welcome to all of you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to attend this program. I assume that you're here for the same reason that I started out 30-some years ago in my own practice. You want to go in business for yourself, and of course this could be applied to other kinds of practices, but I've been in the training and consulting business all this time, and so it's the one I know best, and I'll share what I've learned with you. My motivation for starting my own business, I'll tell you a little bit about that so that you'll know where I was coming from. When I was about 16 years old, I became a ham radio operator, and all through high school I was working on building radio equipment and talking to people around the world, and I really wanted to learn to design them. And so even though it didn't seem possible that I could go to college, we weren't very well off financially, I did manage to get into NC State University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Borrowed my way through school, paid it back when I got out, and I got a BS in electrical engineering and did design work for 15 years. But I worked at a couple of companies, and one of them, the last one I worked at, was a very coercive climate in which they would make you commit to project deadlines that you didn't think you could meet and then beat you up when you didn't. And I got fed up with that after 7 years, and near the end of that time, I met a fellow who taught project management seminars, and the lights went on. That was really appealing to me. And so I found out from him how to connect with an agency in New York City, and signed on with them and went into business for myself. And before I did that, I had read a book on career change called Where Do I Go From Here With My Life? I think it may still be in print all these years later, and it was a very good guide to how to make a career transition in midlife, which is where I was at. And one of the things that they suggested in that book was that you interview everybody you could find who would talk to you who was already in the business of consulting or training or whatnot, and I did. And it's interesting, I didn't know very many people, but every single one of those individuals told me that the key to success in this business is to write. And so I started out writing some articles for some magazines, but I was into my career probably 6 or 7 years before someone suggested in a seminar that I turn my class workbook on project management into a published book. And so I wrote query letters to 3 major publishers, and a week later got back a response from one in Chicago saying, yes, we're interested, and are you going to be in Chicago anytime soon? And this must have been one of those synchronistic things, because as it turns out, I was in Chicago a week later, met with the editor there, and knew on the spot that we had a contract. So I got home, and about a month later, I got another positive response from a publisher in England. They had forwarded my query to there, and then I got a negative from the third publisher. So 2 out of 3 were positive, and that little book has now been in print for 20 years, and it's in a 5th edition, and it's one of 11 total books that I've written in all that time. And these books have done my marketing for me. So everybody that I talked to who said write stuff was absolutely right. And I'll explain a little more about why that's so important in a few minutes. I did one little book for American Management Association, AMACOM Publishing, called Fundamentals of Project Management. And I got paid about $6,000 to write it. It was called a work made for hire, so it was not on a royalty basis. And that little book alone resulted in, I'm sure, $200,000 worth of work with one company, and probably income from other companies that I don't even know about, because you don't always hear where people find you. But this is one of the keys, and so you can put that on your list of things that you want to get ready to do if you want to succeed in this business. Now, in spite of the eventual success that I've had, I'm going to tell you the beginning was really rough. I taught for an agency located in New York City. They sponsored people like me to universities around the country and promoted seminars. And we started out with a program called Leadership Skills for Project Managers. And it did very nicely in the test market. We taught a first class in San Jose, California, and had about 30 people in the class. And it was highly rated, and everybody seemed to like it. And tested it in a couple other markets, and it did very well. And then we went into a recession, and it died like a rock falling off a cliff. And the thing you find is that in recessions, managers don't like to pay for people to take leadership skills training. They don't see a bottom line connection with it. Even though if you've had any experience in managing, you know that leadership is really one of the few things that will make you any money. Your capital equipment doesn't make you any money. It's only the people that run the machines that make the money for you. So in desperation, I started doing cold calling and phone calling and emailing and hard copy mailing. And long story short, I called on very nearly every company I could think of that had training in their curriculum or their workplace. And I had a lot of doors slammed in my face, because at that point in my career, from their point of view, I had no credibility. I was a new kid on the block and didn't have a history, and I hadn't published anything yet. And I have learned over the years that you can't sell training unless people are ready for it. So it turns out to be one of those things where unless the customer calls you, you're probably wasting your time trying to push it. And that's true of a lot of things, especially in this business. They don't want consultants or trainers or coaches unless they're ready for them. Now, fortunately for me, not too long into this career, which started in 1981, by the way, I heard about personal computers coming around, and I bought an Apple III computer, which turned out to be a dinosaur, one of the big economic mistakes that I made. But I was convinced Apple was best, and that was the business computer. And so I bought one and started learning to use it. And the agency asked me about doing a program on project management on the personal computer, and we did launch that program. And it paid the bills for about 3 years. I mean, it was really a hot topic, and we had a lot of good response from it. So that saved me from regretting my decision and trying to find a job somewhere and going back to work. So I'm happy to say that in 34 years now, 34 years come May the 1st, I have been totally self-employed and made it on my own without having to resort to going back to work for anyone. So that's been a good thing for me. But ultimately, again, it was my published books that made my business take off and has continued to market me. So we'll talk about that again shortly. So let's get into the how-to for you. The first thing I want to do is ask you to do some self-examination. What's your reason for wanting to be in business for yourself? Your why, your purpose. Now, I know your motive is to make money. We all have to make a living for at least some time until hopefully we become independently wealthy, if that happens for you. But if that's the only reason you want to be in business, it will not get you very far, because if people find out that the only thing you care about is their money, they'll run away from you like you're a hot potato. And I'm sure you've done the same thing. When somebody comes on too strong and it's clear that they don't really want to serve your needs, all they want to do is make money off of you, then you don't want to talk to them anymore. Now I'm going to recommend to you, when you do download the handouts, by the way, these links are active in that PDF, and so you can download the handouts, and then you can go to this link. It's a talk by Simon Sinek on TED.com on selling your why, and he makes a very strong case for why this is so important. And I really do think that you will find that to be a useful talk. So the link will be on there when you get ready, or you can write it down very quickly. TED.com B08YI. Okay, so the question is, we know you want to go into a practice in consulting, training, coaching, something of that nature, but just what do you want it to be like? Do you want it to remain a one-person practice, that is just you and maybe an assistant to help you with administrative things, or do you want to have a network of employees, people who are also going out doing consulting and training? I've always had what I call a 1099 practice. If you're not from the United States, that's a term designating that we use contract employees without hiring them and putting them on a payroll. And at the end of the year, we have to send a 1099 form to them reporting how much money we paid them so that they can file their income tax. And that was always my primary approach to this, because I didn't want to be burdened with a lot of employee problems, overhead, etc. I'd had my share of that when I worked at ITT Telecom. I've rethought that in recent years, because as I near the age at which people normally retire, actually I'm past that age, but as I think about retiring, one of the problems I have is that I have no company as far as employees are concerned. So you might want to keep in mind that it may be good to start that way, but eventually you may want to rethink that whole thing. What kind of annual revenue do you want to generate? Do you want to travel or work from one location? I can tell you that for about 20 of my 30-some years, I spent a lot of time on airplanes. I'm a million miler with two airlines, and a 250,000 miles with one that went under. That was Eastern Airlines. When they went under, I had 250,000 miles with them. And I live in North Carolina at this point, but I lived up in Virginia for 20 years and went through Pittsburgh a lot and did a lot of work up in Milwaukee. And I got to the point where I knew most of the U.S. Air Gate agents in Milwaukee. I was there so much, and that's not a particularly good thing. It's also not a particularly good thing to be a million miler with two airlines. I've been around the world twice with Delta in business class, and seen a lot of different countries, worked in 30-some odd countries. So there have been some good parts about it, but I can tell you that when you go to Singapore 3 times in 1 year, that's a long trip. It takes about 35, 36 hours to get over there, and I swore I'd never do that again. So that can have a real downside. And of course, I was lucky I didn't have small children, but if you do have small children, that's one of the considerations. You might want to be focused on a local practice instead of a wide-ranging one. The other one is, with whom do you want to work? I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it's important to know the kind of clientele you want and the kind of people you want to work with on your staff as well, if you have a staff. Now, one of the things that you need to do once you decide the kind of business you want to be in is ask yourself, what are the key factors for success? Make a list of about a half a dozen things that must happen in order for your practice to be successful. Now, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the 80-20 principle, but I'm convinced that it's a totally valid principle, and it's one that you want to consider. About 80% of the results you get from anything come from about 20% of the actions you take. And so figure out what those half dozen things are that must happen in order for your practice to be successful. It's interesting to read about how people get started and what they do and what really finally clicks for them. And we're going to talk about some of the things that you need to do for sure. And you will only find some of these things through experience. But if you'll think about some of the things that you need to do, that'll help get you started. Now, another thing I want you to think about is, are you really prepared for success? Because one of the reasons that people fail at this kind of thing, and as you know, most new businesses do fail, is that they're not really success oriented. They think, oh, I'd like to be independent. I'd like to have a business of my own. I want to make a lot of money, but their heart isn't really in it. They have no passion for it. And ultimately they find that it's hard work. It's not getting the kind of results they were hoping for, and they quit. I've seen a couple of people start in this business and they find out that, oh my goodness, it takes as much as 6 months sometimes to find a client. And if you started out with no clients and you're faced with 6 months of no income, that can be really discouraging. So I've got a picture on this slide of Jim Rohn. He died in 2009, I believe it was. And he was a rags to riches guy. He started out as a kid from an Idaho farm. He went to work at age 19. When he was 25 years old, he had nothing in the bank. He was making $56 a year. I'm sorry, that's pretty bad. $56 a week. And he met a fellow named Shove. I forget what his name, first name was, but Mr. Shove. And Mr. Shove said, well, how long have you been working? He said 5, 6 years. And he said, how much money you got in the bank? And he said, none. And Shove said, who sold you on that plan? That's not very smart. He said, you need to decide what you're going to do and start working toward it. And again, long story short, Jim Rohn became a millionaire in about 6 years after meeting Shove. Then he lost it through stupidity, as he says, carelessness, getting carried away with his newfound wealth. And then he made it back again and retained it. He was about 80 years old when he finally passed away in 2009. And he was very well known for his principles on how to be successful. So I've put a link there to a video that's on YouTube. And again, this link will be there when you download the handouts. And you need to practice these principles. Now, first couple of principles that are here are on failure and success. Failure comes from poor judgments made daily over time. In other words, if you do what you've always done, keep on doing what you've always done and getting the same result, you can expect that 5 years from now you'll be just as bad off as you were when you started. And as they say, insanity is keeping on doing the same thing you've been doing and hope for a different result. That's not going to happen. On the other hand, success comes from the disciplined steps that you take, again, practiced over time. And so once you find some of the keys to success in this business, you want to keep doing those and improving on them and so on. Now, there are 2 approaches that you can follow in starting your own practice. You can begin by creating a program of some kind and try to sell it. So, for example, if I be maybe a little silly and I say, well, I'm really good at basket weaving, and I'd really like to start a basket weaving school and teach other people how to make baskets, I would probably find that that's not going to pay a lot of bills for me. It may pay a few, and goodness knows there's a John Campbell folk school in western North Carolina over in Brasstown where they teach all these kinds of things, basket weaving and blacksmithing and wood turning and dancing, all the folk arts and things of that nature. And there are a handful of people around here who make their living doing pottery and those kinds of things, but they're few and far between. So selling that kind of program may not be a very good idea. The other approach, the second approach here, is to identify clients or customers that you want to serve and find out what they need, and then figure out what you can do to satisfy that need if it's within your capability. Develop an approach and then deliver that. And that's the one that I would tell you is the best approach. Sometimes we get smart and lucky and we do the first one. For example, when quality circles came around in 1980, and I'm dating myself with this, there were an awful lot of people around the country that wanted to get in on that and learn how to do those. And so seminars on quality circles usually had 35 to 40 people in them for a while until the market got saturated, and then you couldn't sell those kinds of programs if your life depended on it. But a lot of people found that even though they needed it, they didn't want to do everything that was required to make it work, and so they died a natural death, I guess. So big trick is make sure that what you're doing serves your clients or customers and solves a problem for them of some kind. Now, here's something that I wish I had known 34 years ago and furthermore known how to do. Nothing happens without marketing. Nothing. And marketing does not mean the same thing as selling. As it says here, real marketing is built into what you do and why you do it. It's part of your story that you tell people about what you do. So, for example, if you have a little elevator pitch and you're on an elevator going up or down and you're on it with one other person, they say, what do you do for a living? And you say, well, this is what I do. That's your story. And it consists of keeping promises, an obsession with details, the way you handle emails, and so on. Simple example of that is that when a customer writes you an email and you ignore it for a week or don't answer it at all, they feel like they said hello and you just ignored them. And so those kinds of things are simple and seemingly trivial, and yet they make a lot of the difference between success or failure. So we're going to say more about marketing in a few minutes. I tried selling when I was new. I banged on doors and said, hey, I'm Jim Lewis. I offer training programs in these topics, and would you like to buy one? And everybody said, no, thank you. Go away. Don't bother us. We're too busy to talk to you. So I want to help you avoid that kind of discomfort because it's not much fun. And one of the things that you can be absolutely sure about is potential clients don't give a rat's tail about you. It's about them. In other words, we are all selfish in that respect. We want to know, hey, what can you do for me? If you want some of my money, you better be able to solve a problem for me, or else I don't want to talk to you. I've run across a book called The Fortune Cookie Principle by Bernadette. I'm not sure how you pronounce her name, J-I-W-A, Jawa or Jiwa, who is an Australian. And this lady is really sharp, but she wrote a book called The Fortune Cookie Principle and points out that people don't necessarily buy fortune cookies for the cookie. They buy them because they want that fun little fortune inside. The cookies are okay, but you know, nobody tends to get real addicted to fortune cookies, but they do like those fortunes. And she said that the same thing is true of most products and services. People don't buy the product or the service. They buy the satisfaction of a need or desire that they have. They have an issue of some kind that they want help with, and they want you to be there with something that will solve it for them. And so a training program is a means to an end, or consulting or coaching is a means to an end. So one of the things that you have to do if you're going to be successful is you have to begin by understanding your buyer's persona. And that's not just a friendly relationship with the person. It's not about just getting to know that person. It goes a little deeper than that, and let's see what that means. Before you can launch a business, you need to ask, who is going to be my customer? And everybody in the world is not a valid answer, even if you're making bread. There are folks out there that don't eat bread. And even if they like bread, they may not like the bread you make. They want a special kind of bread. And so there are very few products or services that are going to satisfy the needs of everybody. As a matter of fact, the most successful approach is to find the niche that not many people are in which there is a demand, and then go after it. That's one reason that this program is not aimed at starting businesses in retail, selling cars, selling electronics equipment, selling anything, houses, because I have no experience in that. But I know that there are a lot of folks out there that are interested in profiting off their expertise, their knowledge, their skills, what they can do. And that's the business I've been in for 34 years. It's the business that some of you are interested in. And so this is a niche market. Now, in order to identify the customer or client, and by the way, I want to make a distinction between customer and client. I use the term sort of interchangeably, but they do have a distinction. A customer is somebody you sell things to, and a client is someone who you serve. So medical people serve clients, and retail people serve customers. And the best retail companies, like Nordstrom, for example, try to turn some of those customers into clients because they give such excellent service that they go beyond just the bare bones needs of those people, and they become actual clients of them. And so that's what we want to do. We want to deal with clients. Now we need to ask who our ideal client is. How old is that person? Does gender matter? For example, you may want to offer specialty programs for women only, and there is a huge need for that. And I don't think most of us men can teach those programs adequately. I think you need a woman who's been there and done it, who can relate to the problems that women have to teach those kinds of programs. And so that might be a niche that you want to get into if you're a female. You might also be looking at certain age groups. For example, most of my clients in project management are in the age range of about 25 to 50. We get a few that are older than that, and sometimes you get one that's a little younger, but most of them are in that range of 25 to 50. And so, and of course, across that age span, there are different needs, but that's about it. Then you want to know what kind of interest, hobbies, career, income do these people have? What kind of magazines do they read? Do they belong to any kind of associations or professional groups? Where do they live? Are they in big cities? Are they spread out all over the map? Are they located in any particular region of the country? And of course, in project management, the answer is that they live all over the place, but there are some places that it's hard to reach. And so you need to find out about the demographics there. I'm going to show you a few slides now that have some very specific questions that you need to answer also. What kind of problems are they experiencing? Now, in my case, a lot of people have become project managers by accident. They were in the right place at the wrong time, or the wrong place at the wrong time, or maybe the wrong place at the right time, depending on how you look at it. But whatever the case, they've been made project managers and they have no knowledge of how to do it. I was in that boat. I managed projects for several years before I finally found a seminar on project management, because back in the 60s and 70s when I was doing this, there weren't any programs around to amount to anything. And so I was flying by the seat of my pants, and that's what I find these people doing. And it's frustrating because you don't know what you're doing. You haven't had any instruction in it. You feel helpless. You don't know how to handle the people issues. And especially if you're like me, I was an engineer originally and went back to school and got a PhD in psychology. And I will tell you, a PhD in psychology from an academic point of view won't help you there. But I was fortunate enough to be working as a manager with 63 people in my department, and was able to go back and try the theory in practice to see what would work and what didn't work. And so that first seminar solved a lot of problems for me. I didn't even know what a work breakdown structure was, for goodness sakes, and how to begin to plan a project. And so you're being held accountable for results and you don't know how to get there. So that was the kind of problem that I was having. What kind of rewards will your client gain from working with you? Sometimes they get promoted. Sometimes they find out that this managing thing, in my case, is not for me. In fact, I tell people when they sign on for my programs, if by the end of my seminar you've realized that you don't want to be a project manager, you should send me a check, because I'm going to save you an awful lot of grief. You don't have to do this for the rest of your life and realize finally after 20 years of it that you didn't like it. I have a good friend who likes to say that he spent 15 years trying to get really good at something he didn't like doing, thinking that if he got good at it, he'd enjoy it. And boy, was that wrong. He didn't enjoy it any more after 15 years than he did when he started. So what kind of rewards are they going to gain from working with you? What kind of buying process does your client go through? I subscribe to Shutterstock, by the way, and I saw this. I love these little comical things that they've done with dogs and so on. And so as you can see, this one is all dressed up and trying several things at once and so on. So what kind of buying process does your client go through? Now, from a thinking perspective, very left brain analytical people will tend to go through a process of analyzing the offerings of several different providers before they make a choice. Right brain people will often make a choice based on the contact with the person that is doing the selling. And in your case, it'll be you doing the selling for a while. And so if you make a good impression on them, they'll say, oh, I like this person and I think they're credible and competent and I'm going to buy from them. So you need to find out what kind of process they do go through so that you know how to target your marketing and so on. How does your offering compare with that of other providers using your client's criteria? Using your client's criteria, not your criteria. Because one of the things that we learn in quality control, I was a quality control manager for a couple of years, is that only the client can define what quality means. And by the same token, only they can define what the buying criteria are. Again, sometimes it's relationship. They like you, they think you're a nice person, and they're very impressed with that, and they want to work with someone that they like. And boy, if that's the case, and if that's the way most of your clients make buying decisions, you better be a very likable person. Now, if you can do this fifth one, more power to you. Unfortunately, until you've been in the business for a while, you don't have clients that you can talk to. But having personal conversations with them to figure out all this stuff is the approach that you'd like to follow. And if you're not familiar with the term design thinking, I'd like to commend to you reading some books on design thinking, because design thinking begins with the approach of observing what potential clients need. And one of the best companies in the business for this is IDEO, I-D-E-O. And if you go to www.ideo.com, you'll find their literature and their approach. And Tim Brown has written several books on how they do design. But they were challenged by NBC or CBS or somebody to design a new shopping cart, something fairly uncomplicated, something fairly simple, and show that this design process actually works, that you can actually apply it to almost anything and make improvements in it. And so they went to stores where people had shopping carts and observed them and noticed what kind of difficulty they had with them and designed a shopping cart that solved those difficulties. The Japanese have been good at this for a long time. They go to Disney World and they stand in the parking lots and they watch Americans loading and unloading their cars, and they see what kind of things American families take to Disney on vacation, and they redesign trunks in their cars to try to accommodate all that stuff. That's the proper way to do market analysis, because if you go around and you say to people, what do you want? They don't know. They can't tell you. And the most famous example of that is the little swing cartoon that some of you have probably seen, where they go through all kinds of iterations on designing a swing, and what the kid wanted was a tire swing hanging from a tree. And all the designers got it wrong. By the way, if you've seen the more complicated version of that in the first panel, what you find out is that the child didn't know what he wanted either, and so asking him didn't really work. And that's one of the problems, that if you just go at it from a questioning point of view, what do you need, most people can't tell you. But if you listen to them say, oh, this is really a pain, man, I really wish somebody would come up with a solution for this, or I wish there was a better way to do this. Those are your opportunities. Those are the places where people are feeling some pain, and you can then start thinking about, what could I do to alleviate that pain for the client? Now, even if you've got the best mousetrap in the world, people with a mouse-infested house will not necessarily buy from you. So the question is, why will they buy from you? I don't know that this has really changed. A lot of the social media guru like to talk about the world has changed and you can't sell stuff the way you did back in 50 years ago or whatnot. And I'm not so sure that's true. I think it's always been true that you need to establish your credibility with clients. You need to develop trust so that clients come to you. This is a key. Clients come to you. The shotgun approach to selling just simply doesn't work. For example, when you send out 25,000 direct mail brochures on a seminar, the response rate is about 1 per 1,000. You might get 25 people in your class out of that 25,000 brochures. And even then, unless you have credibility, which means people will be inclined to trust you, you may not even get that. I dropped $25,000 years ago trying to promote one of my seminars. I got 4 people signed up out of a 25,000 mailing because I did it as Jim Lewis and the Lewis Institute instead of working with the university. I can do the same mailing at NC State University under their name and deliver the program under their auspices, and people come because they trust the university. Now, I do a lot of in-company training because those people have read my books or they've been to one of my programs and they've heard me and they've developed trust for me, and they will buy my training on an in-company basis. But if you just mail to a bunch of people who don't know you, you're just throwing your money down a rat hole. Now, more about my book. That first book established my credibility. When you write a non-self-published book, it gives you credibility with potential buyers. Now, I say non-self-published for the simple reason that if I look at it and I say, oh, he published this himself or she did this herself, that doesn't mean as much to me as if it was published by McGraw-Hill or Prentice Hall or Perseus or Amacom or some other publisher, because those are juried, J-U-R-I-E-D. Those are examined by editors and so on, and they pass judgment on them. As a matter of fact, most publishers have an editorial board and several people read your proposal or your book and they decide whether or not they want to publish it. And so a book published by a credible publisher gives you more credibility than one that you self-publish. Now, there are a lot of people making money off self-published books today and gaining clients from it, because if your clients read it and they like it, you're there. But I will tell you one key. If you read the reviews on Amazon, what you'll find is a lot of the self-published books get trashed because of all the typos, the spelling errors. I mean, the people that wrote these books didn't even bother to have a good editor go through them and correct all those errors, and it looks sloppy. And it's like Scandinavian Airlines said years ago when they got a new CEO named Jan Carl Zahn. He said, you know, if the interior of the plane is dirty, the passengers begin to think maybe the maintenance on the engines is not very good either, and this sucker may crash. And so he insisted that the plane be spotless inside and outside to convey an image that was consistent with what they wanted their customers to feel. So by the same token, if you see a book that somebody's written and it's sloppy, it's got a lot of misspellings, grammar's wrong, punctuation is bad, typesetting is really bad, the illustrations are either non-existent or if they're in there, they're sloppy, what kind of work do you think they're going to do for you? And so credibility is really hard to gain and can be destroyed in a moment. Well, what are some ways that you establish yourself as an expert? Because most of us don't want to learn from somebody that's just read a book about doing brain surgery. We want to have a brain surgeon operate on us who has been through the proper rigorous training that they require. And so here are the common ways to do this. There's about 8 of them that are fairly common, and there are a lot of variations on these. Blogging is one of those ways. There are some people out there who are making tons of money off their blogs, or they build it up and then sell it. I think the Huffington Post started out that way. There's a guy named Pat Flynn that has a blog that is making him a lot of money. He's 30 years old. He's making about $700,000 a year doing a blog and a podcast. And his name's Pat Flynn, and he does one called Smart Passive Income. And he tells people how to make money off of passive income. That is books and tapes and articles and documents and training programs that are self-paced and so on. Webcasting can be another way. You're attending this webcast to learn about starting your own business. Now, if you've heard me a few times, I've got credibility with you. If you like this webcast, I'll have credibility with you. On the other hand, if I do a lousy job here, you're going to leave here and say, if you get any information from that guy, just ignore it, because I attended one of his broadcasts and it sucked. It didn't have anything in it to offer, and I wouldn't recommend it to you. You know, they say that a happy customer won't tell too many people, but a dissatisfied customer will tell about 17 of them in a heartbeat. So you don't want to get that kind of negative press. If you get buzz, you want it to be positive buzz, not negative buzz. You can also write books and articles. You can post stuff on social media sites like Google Plus or Facebook, LinkedIn, and others. Some of those sites are better than others for posting. Some of the professional groups on LinkedIn are the ones that you might want to get on and do posting, because that's the kind of audience that you're looking for. For example, there's a group called Young Indian Entrepreneurs. If I were in India and I were trying to help people get started in their business, that would be the group I'd be posting to. And I'd be writing little things that would help them get started, because the basic given here is, if you can give people information that's of value, that's one of the ways that you establish trust. And it's also a way of making them think, you know, this person's really an expert at this, and I bet I could learn a whole lot more from them. So they keep following you, and they're willing to buy other things from you. So that's the approach. You also can answer questions on forums. There are a lot of forums on various websites, and you can look at the comments that people make and the questions that people ask, and you can get on and answer those yourself and establish yourself as an expert. You can conduct free seminars on a local basis. For example, we have at various times offered free seminars at like a Holiday Inn somewhere. It doesn't cost you a whole lot of money to rent a room for an evening, maybe 2-3 hours, have them set it up just with chairs, and have people come in for free and present something to them. Again, that's one way of letting them get to know you, get to see you in action, find out if they like you and trust you, and then follow up from there. That's an approach that's been used for quite a long time, and now it's moving into the webinar or webcasting arena, where we do it this way because that way people don't have to travel so far. The final one I've got listed there is speaking at conventions or professional association meetings, and I'll be very candid with you. I have never, ever gotten a sale off of one of those, not a single one, and I've done quite a few of these. And there's a simple reason for it. The decision makers aren't there. And the people that go back to work and say, hey, I heard this guy named Jim Lewis, and he was good, and I think we ought to bring him in, they got to do a selling job on their boss, and sometimes they can't present you as well as you could. So you find that no matter how many times you go to these programs, they don't do you much good. So it is possible. It's just another way of establishing credibility, but it won't necessarily lead directly to a sale. Now, no matter what you do, the key is to give away information that will help potential clients solve their problems or achieve their goals. Now, a lot of people say, well, if you're going to give them all this stuff, why would they want to come back to you? Well, I know a whole lot more than I can tell you in an hour. And that's the idea. You know a whole lot more than you can tell somebody in an hour. But if I give you something of real value here, something that's really going to help you, if I share with you some of my own experience that will save you from making a mistake that I made, that's valuable. That's worth something to you. And so don't just give them stuff that's so obvious that they already knew it or they could figure it out themselves. Give them really good stuff. And doing this will establish you as somebody that they can trust, and they're much more receptive to your sales pitch when you finally make it. You know, what happens to me is people call me up and they say, I've read one of your books, I love your book, or I attended one of your seminars, and my boss came and sat in on one of your seminars, and we really liked what you did. Can you do the same thing for us? You know, I don't have to do any selling then. All I have to do is say, absolutely, I can do that, and here's the deal, here's what it costs, here's how long it takes, here's how we can go about it, and I'm not really in the selling, I'm just closing the sale, if you will. And so that's the approach that people are following today, and it seems to work. Now, I said earlier, the whole world is not your customer. You can't be something to everybody. Now, I will tell you, in the early days, when I got started and the recession started, and I was hungry, I tried a lot of different things. I taught a course on how to reduce absenteeism and turnover. Now, the trick is I had experience at it because I'd been a manager, and I also read up on the literature and put together a nice little one-day program, and it worked. I taught managing priorities. That's stuff I already knew how to do. I taught assertive management. I taught a seminar on how to deal with difficult employees, and that was a real winner. That worked for a while. But, you know, those were all things within my expertise, and I did a good job at them, and it worked. But eventually, when I got into project management and realized that I had my niche, I had people say to me, hey, can you come teach a quality control program for us? Because we know you were a quality control manager at ITT. And I say, you know, I used to do it, but I'm not an absolute expert at it. And no, I don't do that sort of thing. And so I turn those requests down. I also have people come to me and say, Jim, we can't afford to have our people away from the job for 3 days. Can you shorten that 3-day project management class to a day? And I say, what do you want them to be able to do? And they say, we want them to be able to run projects. And I say, well, they won't be able to at the end of a day. And they say, what'll they be able to do? And I say, they'll be able to talk about it, and not very intelligently at that. I refuse to take those kinds of jobs, because when the person goes back to work and they really can't do what you supposedly taught them to do, it reflects back on you. Their bosses say, well, we put them through that program, we paid a lot of money for it, and they still can't manage projects. That guy must not be any good. And so I just won't do that. It dilutes my credibility. I did a program for a large corporation in Florida one day, and at 10 o'clock we took a break. We started at 8, took a break at 10. And a lady came up to me and she said, you know, we brought in a one-day program from a very famous one-day program provider, and I've learned more in 2 hours from you than we learned from that guy in a whole day, because all he did was stand up here and talk fluff. And so you can't do that kind of thing. You damage your reputation, your credibility, when you provide somebody with a solution that doesn't work. So as I say in the middle paragraph down there, if you teach, for example, don't confuse your potential clients by also trying to teach basket weaving, guitar playing, and pig calling. It just won't work. People want to buy from a master of one thing and not from a jack of all trades. By the way, if they want training in some other field and you have an expert on your staff, if you have a contractor who's an expert in that field, then you can sell them that training program under your auspices. That's a different thing. Now, one of the big causes of failure for new startups is overhead. When I was at ITT, we had to learn a lot about accounting, and one of the things that I learned from experience there was that overhead will sink your ship. As a matter of fact, one of the terms for overhead is burden, B-U-R-D-E-N. We call it the overhead rate or the burden rate. The reason becomes obvious when you find yourself having to pay rent, light bills, administrative expenses, travel expenses, and all kinds of things, even though you got no income flowing into the business. So try to keep your overhead low. As a matter of fact, don't go out and rent a 3,000 square foot office space for just you. in the hope that you're going to fill it soon, because you're better off to acquire associates and then go rent something that will meet your needs if you want to. Best yet, work out of your home for a while until you absolutely have to have working space. I did that until my little office room got too cramped and I had to go out and rent myself an office. It does have disadvantages. Meeting clients is a hard thing to do, but then I didn't have a lot of clients to meet at the time anyway, so it was not too big a deal. And if I did need to meet a client, I could go to a neutral place like a coffee shop or something. And there are definite tax advantages, because you can list an office in the home as a legitimate tax deduction if you itemize your taxes, and that'll save you some money. And for goodness sakes, don't hire employees until you've built your business to the point where you need employees, because paying salaries to people that aren't generating any income for you is just a huge drain on your cash. And one of the things I'd like to commend to you if you read this slide is two outfits, and there's more, but elance.com or freelancer.com. That's in that second paragraph there. There are millions of people around the world who are on these sites ready to do contract work for you. For example, on Freelancer, you can get a business card designed for $99 and you'll have 30, 40 graphic designers bidding on it, and they'll all provide you with a sample, and you pick the one that you want and you pay only the one from whom you bought the design. Elance works a little bit differently than that. I've had two apps designed now for both the Android and the iPhone platforms, iOS platforms, by a company in northern India, up in a place called Chandigarh near the base of the Himalayas. And these folks in India charge about $15 an hour to do programming that if I had it done here in the States would cost me $50 an hour. They do great work. They're dependable, but you do have to be careful. It's just like hiring a regular employee. You have to make sure you hire somebody that you can trust. So you look at the evaluations on the site that have been received from other people and see what other hiring people say about them. And that way you can avoid hiring somebody that's not competent or whatnot. And by the way, I got burned by one guy, so this is not an infallible process. This guy quit in the middle of the job, and I'd already paid him. Now, ordinarily, you don't pay until you're satisfied with the work, and I paid for what he had done so far, but he didn't do the follow-up, and what he had done for me was no good. I couldn't give it to someone else to go through. So be careful. Now, don't go crazy and get carried away with this, but your identity is important. Your literature, your website, your business cards, other collateral are what potential clients will judge you for. So invest in a good graphic designer, even if it's a contractor. Don't try to do this sort of thing yourself unless you have training in the field. When you give people these little perforated business cards that you bought at Staples or Office Max or Office Depot, and you've printed them yourself on your dot matrix printer, it's okay. I'm not saying you should never do it, but it says, hey, I'm just getting started. Well, that doesn't say you have an awful lot of credibility, certainly not in terms of experience, so it can backfire on you. Like it says there in red, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. On my big brochure for a weekend program I'm doing that follows this webinar, this will be a 2-day program on how to launch and market your own practice, and this is a paid event. This is what I sent my graphics designer. Her name's Leslie Bird. She's in Cary, North Carolina. She goes under the business name Adesso Designs. And so she took this, and this is what she turned it into. Now, I'm just showing you the first page. The rest of it's beautiful as well. And if you want to see a full copy of the brochure, you can download it at that link. And again, when you download the handouts, you'll have all these links, and they do work. So this is coming up in June. Now, the importance of this is also reflected in the work Steve Jobs did at Apple. when he was fired by Scully. He brought Scully in and then got fired by him, I guess. And when he finally was brought back to Apple, somebody asked him how he planned to turn the company around, and he replied, with industrial design. And that's absolutely a major, major part of what he did. It's not the only one, because he was an excellent marketing guy. But if you bought an iPod or a MacBook Pro or some other Apple product, it's such a beautifully designed package, you want to frame the darn box. In fact, I was really distraught when my wife threw my box away that my MacBook Pro came in. And I'm just joking a bit, but it really is done well. And the product itself is so beautifully designed, so beautifully styled, that you look at it and you think it must be really, really good. And boy, does it look better than a PC. And that's true. There's a principle in psychology that says what is beautiful is judged to be good. And so again, when you provide somebody with the best looking classroom materials, the best looking business card, the best looking product, if it's hardware, they immediately think this must be a good thing. When people walk into my classrooms, I want them to see that workbook looking first class, because it's the first impression they have. All right, a few more little topics here, and this will bring us up to closing. We only have a few minutes left. And by the way, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I'll give you that address on the last slide. One of the things that you need to do as soon as you start generating some revenue is begin innovating. Examine everything you do and ask yourself, how can I do this better, faster, or cheaper in such a way that I create a difference of value to my clients compared to my competitors? Doesn't matter that you create difference unless it has value to your client. So keep that in mind. Innovation just to be different is not going to get you there, but innovation to deliver greater value for the same price, that will get you there. I got this next idea from Jack Canfield's book, The Success Principles, and I'm very grateful for this idea. It's a really neat approach. Every day, ask yourself, what are 5 things I can do to accomplish each goal that I have? Now, you shouldn't have more than a half a dozen goals, because that's going to mean 30 things that you might be doing every day. And you probably should be focused on one of them. So in their case, they were trying to launch their book called Chicken Soup for the Soul. And this is Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen. And so they were doing 5 things every day to help make that book a winner. And needless to say, they got it done, because it's sold millions of copies now. Always follow this rule. Don't just satisfy. Exceed expectations. If you do this well enough, and I'm serious when I say this, you eventually won't have any competition. There won't be anybody even close to you. You'll be number 1, 2, and 3 all together, and they'll be 4, 5, and 6. And so do the best that you can possibly do to meet the needs of your client. There are 4 rules for success I'd like to share with you. Work on the business at least 20% of the time. If you work in the business all the time, it won't grow. That means you got to spend about 1 day a week on your marketing and business improvement and so on. Secondly, work on you. You need to be in a constantly learning mode. When you talk about lifelong learning, it doesn't mean wait till you're 70 to start learning. It means do it as you go, so that when you finally get to the end, you are there. Don't neglect your family and friends to make your business work. You may find that you built a fine business and lost the people that mean something to you and gave you a reason for starting the business in the first place. So try to maintain some balance. Develop a plan for your business. If you don't have a plan, you have no control by definition. And so you don't want to try to run without a plan. Now, one of the things that I'm going to give you with permission from my mentor, David Newman of Do It Marketing, is a 21-day business planning marketing plan, and you could call it a business planning tool. And you can download it at this link on this slide. So when you download the slides, or by the way, I'm going to send all of you an email that tells you how to download these slides, just in case somebody doesn't have it. When you go to that site, you can download this 21-day plan. You can also go to David's website, doitmarketing.com, and download it there. And you can contact me at lewisinstituteinc@yahoo.com, and I will be glad to correspond with you and answer any questions that you have after this program's over, because I know we're running out of time and some of you have to go back to work. This is the best marketing book I've found. I've read tons and tons of books over 34 years, and this is the best one I know of. I also highly recommend Darren Hardy's book, The Compound Effect. I wish I'd found this book 50 years ago. And I would even recommend that you buy 10 copies, read one yourself, and give the other 9 to friends and family and people that you want to see become successful in life. It's a wonderful book. Darren's a publisher of Success Magazine. I also recommend reading Success. This is a further reading list on the last slide, and it's just a handful of things because I didn't want to hit you with a whole bunch of things, but stay in touch. You're on my email list, and I will be in touch with some of you as time goes by and sending you some other information and things. And we will have a website soon called Millionaire Entrepreneur that is aimed at people like yourselves who want to interface with other people in the same venue. And since our time is up, I'm going to say thank you very much for being here, for sharing your time with us. And my objective is to help as many people as I possibly can become successful entrepreneurs. And so unless you don't want to hear from me again, as they say, you haven't heard the last of me yet. Thank you so much. Take care. Have a good day and a good rest of the weekend.